Greetings all you movie junkies and entertainment lovers, and welcome to yet another retrospective video. Today we're going to be taking a look at the 1990s series Forever Knight, which ran from 1992 to 1996, and it is essentially the story and the concept of Forever Knight essentially follows an 800-year-old vampire named Nick Knight, who has basically been around for 800 years and is basically, after that time, has decided that he no longer wants to be evil and that he wants to go back. He's kind of sick of being a vampire and he essentially wants to go back to being mortal again. And so by doing that, he sort of tries to kind of make amends for all of the wrongdoings and stuff that he's done in the past and for all the people that he's killed as a vampire. So he does that by becoming a cop on the night shift. Which I know sounds kind of silly, and actually, when you hear sort of the concept of the show, it sounds like a show that was probably made sort of in the 1970s, sort of like an Incredible Hulk sort of type of thing, but it's actually not, and it's actually, despite the concept sounding quite silly, it's actually it takes itself quite seriously, and is actually incredibly well done, I have to say. And the series, what is so great about this series is that, because he's been around, because Nick has been around for 800 years, whenever he's working, for every single episode, whatever case he's sort of working on, or whatever, he will essentially, it will remind him of something that happened in the past. And so every episode we have sort of flashbacks to the past, and so there's a lot of sort of period piece type stuff in the show. And sort of whereas that thing went horribly wrong in the past, he tries to sort of, with what's going on in the future, which is very similar, he tries to where, maybe he did the wrong thing in the past, he now tries to do the right thing now. So it's very, very well done. And, it's very interesting because a lot of times it's, that's all it will be. It will just be something in the past that kind of reminds him of a case that he's working on in the present day. But there are a lot of times where the events in the past actually do tie into what is going on in the present day, which is very interesting. Now, I will be honest, I'm not... in terms of the show itself, the flashback stuff is actually probably my least favorite part of the show. Now, for a low-budget show, it actually is quite impressive when you just sort of look at the flashback stuff on its own, what they were able to do. It is actually quite impressive, but I do find it to be a little bit hit and miss with, there are times when it really is very incredibly well executed the way that they tie it in, but I do feel like there are a lot of times, a lot of episodes where you'll watch it and I'll sort of think to myself, what was the reason for us seeing all those flashbacks and stuff? So it is a little bit hit and miss. Again, like I said before, there are times when stuff from the past actually will tie into what's going on. But in terms of sort of, sort of the setting and some of the other characters, the show itself, as I previously mentioned, or I think I previously mentioned, was of course, like a lot of shows, especially a lot of low budget kind of shows around this time, was of course shot and filmed in Toronto, Canada. And the show itself, which is kind of very interesting, is actually set in Toronto, Canada. Whereas, so many shows still to this day, of course, are filmed in Canada, but most of the time they're not actually set in Canada. But this one actually was, which was kind of interesting. And so because of that, they didn't have to hide the fact that it was, filmed in Canada. So we've got a lot of these sort of Toronto sort of backdrop and everything of it, which, again, not a lot of shows, even though a lot of shows are filmed in Canada, not a lot of shows are actually set in Canada. So because of that, that is one thing that I think gives the series a very unique kind of look, a unique kind of style, a signature look, very much like how, Seattle is very kind of synonymous with Frasier, New York perhaps, a little bit synonymous with Friends and stuff. Whenever I think of Canada, specifically Toronto, and I see, you know, the Toronto Tower or whatever, I think of Forever Knight. So that's one thing that is really interesting about the series. And it is very much a Canadian show. It was a Canadian production company that worked on it. It was a lot, you got a lot of Canadian actors in the show. Of course, it's set in Canada, filmed in Canada, so it is very much a Canadian series. But in addition to the character of Nick, we also, of course, have a couple other characters as well. The first sort of immediate character is, we do have a couple of other vampire characters. The first of which is LaCroix, who's played by Nigel Bennett, who of course has been in tons of different movies and shows over the years. And LaCroix is essentially the vampire that turned Nick into a vampire, you know, all those years ago. And LaCroix is essentially, I would say, sort of the more traditional sort of vampire character, sort of the more kind of Dracula type of vampire character. You know, he's not doing like a Bela Lugosi sort of impression, but he is very much kind of gives off a lot of sort of the Hammer sort of, you know, Dracula kind of vibes, you know, Christopher Lee vibes, which is very interesting. And he's, you know, been around, you know, even longer than Nick has. And he is essentially, in the present days, also in Toronto, basically has his own sort of talk, sort of radio show, where he calls himself the Nightcrawler, and he basically sort of goes on these sort of tangents and musings and reads all these different quotes and things, and it's often, he will often say things on his show that very much kind of tie into and will kind of sort of subtly kind of reference whatever is going on with Nick. Because of course he knows that Nick is listening, and it's almost like it's LaCroix's way of letting Nick know that he's always watching, he's always aware of what is going on. And he you know, of course, he and Nick do interact quite a couple of times throughout the series. Early on in the series, we mostly only really see him through flashback stuff, but he is basically quite amused by Nick's quest for redemption. And you know, the way LaCroix kind of sees it is that you know, you're pretty much evil for, you know, about 800 years, and there's, you know, we do see through flashbacks that Nick has gone through different phases of trying to be good and then being kind of bad, and so LaCroix kind of just sees this as a phase. He's like, you know, so his kind of way of looking at it is that, you know, okay, you know, you go and you know, pretend to be good for a while, and then when you realize that that's all nonsense, you know, come back talking to me. So he doesn't really take it very seriously, and he's always kind of, you know, sort of, again, like I said before, you know, saying certain things on his radio show, which, you know, kind of are almost kind of taunting Nick in a way. But yeah, very good character. So, and then you also have another vampire character named Jeanette, who was also turned into a vampire by LaCroix. So LaCroix is essentially, I guess, like their master or whatever. And she basically owns a vampire nightclub called The Raven, which basically has all these, you know, other it basically is a place for all these other vampires essentially to go, which does kind of raise the question of sort of just how many vampires are there exactly, because throughout the series there are a lot of vampire characters that, you know, that eventually, you know, kind of come into, you know, different episodes in the story and stuff. But it's never really exactly made clear in the series kind of just how many vampires are there and how exactly, sort of how much of, how aware is mankind of their existence. Because the way we're basically made to believe is that humanity basically has no idea that vampires exist. And so I'd be very interested to know, and they never really go into it, whether or not there are any vampires in sort of very highly sort of influential positions or not. But one thing that is kind of interesting is the fact that this is I think one part of the series that perhaps you haven't got quite think about as much, but the fact that these vampires, you know, we see all these, you know, these people in you know, flashbacks and stuff, that Nick or others turn into vampires. Sometimes they will come back in the present day or whatever, and sometimes there's these other vampire characters that we meet later in the series. and all from these like different parts of the world, and some like or in Paris and Rome and stuff like this, and yet for some reason they all end up in Toronto, Canada, in the 1990s. It's a little bit. It's sort of that's sort of the one part of the show that I think perhaps wasn't really thought about as well. That it's one part of the show that you've got to sort of just kind of let go of your head, just kind of like say okay, whatever. But again, it's something that's never really made clear. Like, do they travel in packs? Do they? I mean, there is one episode in the series where Nick essentially goes to a vampire whose actual kind of job is to help vampires relocate to different places and stuff, and that's essentially how apparently they have been able to avoid detection from humanity over the years, is because every once in a while they were, after a certain amount of time they will leave and then start a new life somewhere else. So you do kind of, as the series goes on, you do and because of Lacroix's sort of monologues and stuff, you do kind of start to wonder, just how good is Nick really? Is this just a phase that he's going through, or does he really want to become good? And you're sort of torn on it, and they do a good job over the course of the series, kind of making you kind of wonder, like, how good is he really? You do start to wonder, is Lacroix right? But yeah, so very interesting. And then of course you do have a couple of non-vampire characters as well. The first character you have is Natalie, who's essentially a sort of medical examiner working at the working for the police, and she's basically the only non-vampire that knows Nick is a vampire, and she's sort of trying to help him find a cure and to figure out how to go back to being mortal. It could have very easily become kind of like an Incredible Hulk, Bill Bixby Incredible Hulk type of thing, where it's the series about how he's trying to look for a cure, but the show never really throughout its entire run really focuses on that. There is one great episode where he does seemingly seem to cure himself for one episode, a great episode called The Fix, which I think was in season 2, but of course, as you can imagine, it being in the middle of the series, it only sort of ends up being a temporary thing. But that's a really great episode. So yeah, so again, not really about him as much trying to find a cure, but so she's basically the only one that knows that Nick is a vampire and is sort of trying to help him and stuff. And then we also have Lieutenant Don Skanky, played by John Kaplos, who is another great actor who's been in tons of movies and shows over the years, and he's kind of the comedy relief of the series. He's a really fun character, and he is completely oblivious to the fact that Nick is a vampire essentially, and and we will often, of course, see throughout the series Nick sort of using his sort of vampire abilities to, stop the criminals or whatever, or, help solve the crime or whatever. So it is kind of a bit of a superhero type of a show in that sense. But the show itself, other than, at least for like the first 2 seasons or so, other than, sort of, Lacroix and Jeanette and, sometimes other vampires appearing, there really isn't any sort of supernatural elements. Again, at least for the first 2 seasons, it actually pretty much, the way it plays is essentially, it plays itself as a sort of general 1990s, sort of 90s, 80s sort of traditional kind of cop show, except the main character just so happens to be a vampire, which is very interesting. So in a way, it kind of is similar to the Incredible Hulk, the original Incredible Hulk TV series, where they kind of chose to make Nick and the vampires kind of be the most fantastical element, whilst everything else is kind of just sort of, kind of normal. Which is very interesting. And the show essentially, it originally aired, I think it was on CBS as part of they had like this block called, I think it was, I can't remember what it was called, something like the Crime Time After Prime Time or something, which essentially was what it was sort of a part of. And I guess I should mention quickly is that the series actually was actually first done as a movie several years prior, and John Kaplos, who plays Skanky, is the only sort of actor from the original movie to be brought over to the series. And I've never seen the original TV movie. Apparently it's basically just this, from what I understand, it is basically just the same story from the first 2 episodes. And in all of the reviews and stuff that I've seen for it, most people seem to agree that that they did it better in the TV series than the original movie. But who knows, maybe at some point, if I ever do get around to seeing the original TV movie, which I believe was just called Nick Night, it was not called Forever Night, I might do maybe kind of a comparison, seeing what some of the differences and stuff were. But again, so they did the original TV movie, then a few years later it finally got made into a series, and it was part of this sort of prime time after prime time block, which I guess wasn't really that successful, because it seems like they, after about a year, basically only a season or so, they pretty much cancelled all these shows. So Forever Night actually was pretty much cancelled after only 1 season. And then, I guess, luckily, enough people liked it enough to where a lot of people were writing in, begging for it to come back. And then eventually, about, an entire full year later, so there were no new episodes during sort of the 1993 to 94 sort of season. They brought it back in I think it was the fall of 94. It finally came back for a second season. And, yeah, so and then I think it was in the second season, it was basically just sort of a first run syndication show, and then finally in the third season, and it was picked up by USA Network of all things, which is kind of ironic considering that the show, like I mentioned before, is very much a Canadian show with a lot of Canadian actors set in Canada, and yet USA Network, but so it's better than nothing, right? Now, one of the things that I love so much about this show, why I think it's so great, is the tone. It has this, it has a fantastic, honestly one of my favorite intros of all time. This incredible music by Fred Mullen, who I guess was just sort of the go-to guy for doing these sort of low-budget kind of music for these horror shows and stuff. And it's this fantastic sort of synthwave kind of gothic, sort of, retro kind of music, which just fits the look and tone of it beautifully. And it very much is a show that was sort of made sort of that time, and has a very signature look and feel to it, which to me is the most appealing part of the series, is the tone and the look and the music. That's fantastic music in the show. And by the time they got to the third season, they did they were starting to sort of reinvent the show a little bit. They had gotten rid of a bunch of characters. They had brought in a bunch of new characters, some of which were vampire characters. By the time they got to the third season, they were starting to introduce sort of more supernatural elements, and you had episodes where you had like some ghosts and sort of demons and stuff like that, which was very interesting. And it definitely, I feel like the third season was the weakest of the 3 seasons. There are some fantastic episodes in that third season, which, again, to me, some of the best episodes of the series are in the third season. In fact, honestly, I think my favorite episode of the whole series, which was the second to last episode, is actually probably my favorite of the entire series. But they definitely were starting, I feel like they were, by the time they had gotten to the third season, they had pretty much, I feel like it had explored the, sort of the concept of the show to the fullest. And, there were definitely some kind of very weak episodes in the third season, whereas the first 2 seasons I thought were pretty much fantastic, pretty much all the way throughout. For instance, to me, what is probably the worst episode of the series is an episode where we introduce a vampire dog. Yes, a vampire dog. So as if a vampire cop wasn't sort of us trying to get people to watch a show about a vampire cop wasn't worse enough, and now we're going to introduce a vampire dog. Yeah, so in every show, pretty much almost every show has got some episodes that are kind of weak, and I guess that was a slow week, and they just could have sort of been running out of ideas. And does have a pretty cool twist ending though. That episode, I will say that, and luckily the vampire dog never comes back. Um, but but yeah, so but even though it reinvented itself a little bit, and I mean, it's kind of funny because there's literally a new captain of the police precinct for every single season. There's a new captain of the police precinct. So even though it got rid of a couple of characters, introduced some new characters and stuff, the tone of the show, the DNA of Forever Knight, the look and feel of it was kept throughout the entire series, and that to me again is one of the really great things about this show, is the fact that even with some of the cast changes and stuff, the show itself stayed the same. It stayed to its roots. It stuck with its look. They didn't try to change the look of it and make it into something else. It did, kind of get a little bit more sort of edgier with some of the storylines in that last season. And again, like I said, these we're starting to introduce some kind of more supernatural elements. But it is a show about vampires to begin with, so it's like, why not? But yeah, so very interesting. Now, but again, I think when a show starts to like reinvent itself a little bit like that, and they start to bring in new cast and get rid of a bunch of the old cast and stuff, it's almost always a telltale sign for shows like this that they're coming to an end. That they're sort of grasping at straws, that they're not getting the viewership that they want, and that they're trying to figure out a way to try to get people who are not watching the show to start watching the show. And pretty much almost always with these shows, it pretty much is a telltale sign that it's on its way out. It is. There have been examples with shows in the past and stuff where they will reinvent themselves and they can continue. For instance, I guess a good example would be Fear the Walking Dead. Fear the Walking Dead, in its 4th season, pretty much completely reinvented itself. They got rid of a bunch of the old cast, they got brought in a bunch of new characters, a whole new setting, but very much a different tone. And that series, at the time that I'm recording this, I believe it's in its 7th season, and has been renewed for an 8th. So, it is possible that, you can sort of reinvent a show and change things and bring in new cast and stuff, and kind of keep it going. But unfortunately, in the case of Forever Knight, that wasn't the case. Now, one of the good things is that I guess that they probably by that point figured that the show was probably going to be cancelled again. Apparently, they had to pretty much fight to get the show renewed every single season, basically. So by the time they got to the 3rd year, I think that they pretty much figured, the creators of the show pretty much figured that they probably weren't going to get renewed again. So I think after almost 70 episodes, which I believe there's 70 episodes of total. Yeah, 70 episodes. There were 70 episodes total, 3 seasons, and I think you can tell that they pretty much figured that, okay, let's wrap it up. And sure enough, it's one of those few examples of a show that didn't run for very long, got cancelled, but it does have a proper ending, and they did actually write a proper ending. The last episode, which is actually called Last Night, which is very, very clearly was written as the last episode, and it's almost like they kind of killed the show themselves. They were kind of like, what, let's just make it so that the show can't be renewed for another season, And I feel like, again, with a lot of the episodes in the 1st season being a lot weaker than the first 2 seasons, I think probably they kind of, I get the feeling at least that they kind of figured that we've explored this concept. We've done what we wanted to do. We've set out what we wanted to do. They weren't able to really get a huge sort of following on the show, but there definitely was a good enough following and good enough response to where it lasted for 3 seasons, and so they decided let's go out. And that last episode, so it does have a proper ending, which is great. It does have a proper ending. So many shows over the years, they end and they just don't, never get a proper ending, which is a shame. A lot of shows sometimes they run even longer than this one. But luckily, Forever Night is one that did get a proper ending. Now, again, I've said this for years, and I will probably continue to say this. I feel like every show that gets cancelled, or is going to get cancelled, I feel like it should be a thing where if a show is going to get cancelled, you basically get every single show, no matter what show it is, or what network, whatever, that you get 2 more episodes. Basically, so you get, so basically a network says, okay, we don't want to pick this up for another season, so you get 2 more episodes to try to if you want to the creators, so that they can get the choice to wrap things up or give things a proper ending or whatever, or they can either but it's just kind of should be like an optional thing where so if they could say no or try to see if another network wants to pick up the show or whatever. But anyway, that's just something that I think I might have said that in one of my previous retrospectives. That's just something that I think would be really, really great, because it always sucks when a show you really like gets cancelled and things just never seem to quite get resolved. But luckily, this is not one of them. Forever Night does have a proper ending. Now, the thing is that a lot of fans do not like the ending to the series. And I can definitely see why. I will say this, it is not a happy ending. It is not a happy ending. I like the ending. I like the final episode. I have a couple of theories as to why a lot of people did not like it. My initial kind of theory is that the second to last episode of the series is phenomenal, and honestly is probably my favorite episode of the whole show. It's probably the most epic episode, and they killed off one character in that episode, so they clearly by that point I think pretty much knew that they were going to be wrapping up, and that they were going to be doing that one last episode. And it's such a great sort of epic story, and has a lot of stakes, and it's really, really exciting, and honestly really feels like a final episode. And I feel like with that being the second to last episode, and then going into the actual final episode, which is a much more of sort of a somber kind of ending, if you will, with a lot of sort of clips and stuff from previous episodes, I feel like I can see why a lot of people would be kind of disappointed, and I do feel like they clearly could have done better. The fact that we have that second to last episode, I think proves that they could have done a much better final episode. But I feel like you have to sort of understand that they didn't have, the luxury that a show like Cheers or Friends had, where you really get to put all the bells and whistles on your ending. But I do feel like maybe they should have, because I feel like it's pretty clear with that second to last episode that they kind of knew, or at least were starting to get an inkling that they were going to be ending it. And I feel like maybe what they should have done is they should have incorporated both the story of the last 2 episodes into one story, and just made it like a really epic 2-parter. But again, we don't really know what the circumstances were. Maybe they just didn't really quite have the time to plan it out that way. But yeah, I feel like that is a reason why a lot of people just do not like the final episodes. Just is because the second to last episode is great and is awesome. And would have in itself maybe been a great final episode, but again wouldn't have been a very fitting final episode. And that is the thing about the final episode, is that even though it is not a happy ending and it is a very tragic ending, I do feel that, when I think about it, I do feel that it is a very fitting ending, and that it is a very tragic ending to a very tragic story. And I can understand, people being disappointed, and, but it is fitting, and I do feel like when I watch the series again, I think I'm only gonna like the ending more. And frankly, the ending does make you want to go back to the beginning of the series and start watching it again. But yeah, it's they do kind of make it so that there was nothing really left to do. It was clearly written as a final episode. They had a great run, 70 episodes, and Yeah, I like the ending. You know, not the best episode, but you know, it was at least. I think you have to just sort of be thankful that it got an ending. You know, because again, a lot of shows that run even longer than Forever Night don't end up getting proper endings like the way Forever Night did. So yeah, so that's just kind of my thoughts on the show overall. Just absolutely love it. In terms of the availability of the show, it was originally released. Oh gosh, probably like 15 years ago now. It was put out by Sony. They put out these absolutely just gorgeous box sets. You know, they put out each season in its own box set. They had these great cover arts. You had a couple like audio commentaries on there with the cast and crew and stuff. Just really really great stuff. Unfortunately, though, those DVDs, pretty much all of those are like really long out of print, so you honestly just cannot find them anymore. But if you can find them, those are the DVDs, the releases of the show that you probably want to get. But since then, it has been released, the entire series has been released on DVD by Mill Creek, of which I have right here. So this is a complete series of Forever Night. Now, um, so the Mill Creek set, of course Mill Creek being good old Mill Creek, when you buy the set, it actually will come in a cardboard box with all the episodes essentially in these cardboard sleeves. And essentially it's little cardboard sleeves, which is very very annoying. So what I did is I basically just when I started watching the show, because that was how I started watching the show. I got the Mill Creek set, which you can find for pretty cheap, which is good. And I started watching it, and I pretty much fell in love with it immediately, and I knew that it was a show that I was gonna really like and probably want to revisit a couple more times. So what I did was I actually basically bought a proper case for the show, and I actually had the cover and stuff are printed off, and had in this way I've got all the discs are on their own hub and everything, which is very very nice. So yeah, so that way it's just a lot easier to get to the discs and stuff. But yeah, I mean, I do really like Mill Creek. They put out a lot of stuff that just nobody else puts out. But I mean, if someone like me can literally just buy like a better like case, and and have put and everything, it's like it's just they gotta do better. It's just, and I know that they're like trying to save money and stuff, but I mean, come on, just a cheap case like this, being even better. It's like But anyway, so as of right now, I basically try to avoid Mill Creek, TV show box sets at all costs, because I bought another set, which was the complete series of Third Rock from the Sun, which just arrived like completely damaged and all this stuff because it was just this flimsy cardboard box and all this. But yeah, so before anybody asks, no, I will not be doing this for your copy. If you buy the box set, you will have to do this yourself if you like. But yeah, I figure it's my own copy. I can do what I want with it. I want to be able to comfortably be able to access the show when I want. This way I know none of the discs are going to get damaged or anything really, or at least have less chance of it. But yeah, in terms of the show being like on streaming and stuff, I think it's been popped up a couple of times over the past number of years, but right now it seems like the only way you can really get it is on DVD. And again, with kind of the sort of the obscure nature of the show, I doubt that it's probably ever going to be released again, or at least made on anything past DVD probably. But again, the show is out there, so if you can find it, I mean, I would highly recommend it. I think it's a fantastic series. Again, very very unique series. Again, if you like a lot of those sort of classic, sort of low budget sort of horror shows and stuff from around that time, Forever Night is definitely one that you want to check out. It's a really really great series. Again, for me, the big drawing point is the look, the tone, and everything, which to me is very much just sort of a part of the aesthetic of the show. And in it being sort of a low budget show, of course the quality when you watch it, if you buy the DVD copies or whatever, you know, is not great. But again, to me, it very much fits with sort of the macabre, gothic sort of nature of the show, where it would almost be a shame if it was to get remastered in like Blu-ray or whatever. But again, if there was ever to be a Blu-ray of the show, obviously I would buy it. But again, I think that at least for the first season anyway, it was one of those shows where it was, you know, it was filmed on film but then edited on standard definition video, which basically means that the elements required to do like a 1080p HD version of it just don't exist. At least for the first season anyway. The seasons 2 and 3 are clearly just in slightly better quality. I don't know, but yeah, again, I think, unfortunately, I think DVD, at least in terms of like home media and stuff, is probably the farthest I think this show is ever gonna go. But again, for me, again, I hope with this video to just sort of bring attention to the series, because again, it is very much a hidden gem, and I would highly recommend it if you know, enjoy a good vampire story, and again, you know, a lot of other shows from around this time period. It's a really great series, and definitely one that I will be revisiting again in the future. So yeah, great stuff. So yeah, until next time, be sure to consume as much entertainment as humanly possible, and I will see you in the next video.